The Bansemer's next landfall for painting and travel, Nassau in the Bahamas, where Sarah and Roger will visit with a street artist and buy a souvenir painting of the same lighthouse that Roger will also paint later in his studio.
We're entering the Nassau Harbor off the island of New Providence in the Bahamas, which contains well over 700 islands. Nassau is the capital and where most of the population lives. It's also where many cruise ships dock and let their guests disembark to explore the island. This place is paradise for fishermen and vacationers from all over the world, not to mention artists. I wondered if we'd see the artist we met here several years ago, and sure enough, there he was, working in sight of the picturesque Prince George Wharf and the Nassau Lighthouse. Jeff's painting system is even more portable than Roger's, using the sidewalk to hold his paints and brushes and palette, balancing his canvas boards on his knees. He has his eyes on the center of harbor activities here at his outdoor studio and uses a cardboard palette to mix his colors on and create scenes of the area that tourists might want to take home. Jeff says he also likes to paint from a picture postcard sometimes and will sketch it out first using a grid system to transfer a smaller image to a larger scale. I examined several paintings and particularly liked the lighthouse painting and decided to add it to our collection. Jeff insisted on washing off any dust or tire tracks that might have collected before he signed it. He said shortly before we arrived, a truck backed over some of his artwork and left a mark. Plein air painting can have its drawbacks, but I didn't know how dangerous it could really be. Being acrylic, the signature dried very quickly with the help of the warm tropical breeze. I know we'll enjoy this reminder of our trip when we get home. I find buying from a local artist or craftsman that we had an opportunity to chat with makes buying a souvenir more personal and memorable. Jeff Lewis. That was the finishing touch. Roger said he likes my purchase and he wants to paint a similar view when he gets back to the studio. So we take some photos that he can work with later on that capture the feel of the day and the color of the water. The Nassau Lighthouse is on Paradise Island, which used to be called Hog Island and was built in 1817, making it close to 200 years old now. This is the oldest and the best-known lighthouse in the Bahamas and the oldest surviving lighthouse in the entire West Indies. The talented builders are long gone, but this important and wonderful structure remains.
Lighthouses are a favorite subject of mine, but today the inspiration for this particular painting came from Mr. Lewis, who painted this on location in the harbor at Nassau. I was fortunate enough to have a long lens, so I took a picture of the same lighthouse, and I'm going to paint this in oils. I have a 16 by 20 inch piece of masonite. In acrylics, I put a thin coat of burnt sienna on here just to get rid of that white. Well, I'll take Mr. Lewis's painting, put it over here, and then use the reference photo I took with the long lens from my laptop. On my palette, I have titanium white, ultramarine blue, cerulean blue, and Indian yellow, but this particular Indian yellow is opaque. I like the transparent Indian yellows. This one happens to be opaque, and these all vary according to manufacturer, but this is what I've got. Then I have alizarin crimson, and I may put more colors out as I go along. I think I'll start with my dark colors. So I'll pick up the ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, touch of this yellow. That just makes a very, very dark color, doesn't it? I always start with my darks, and that's especially true with oils because It's very difficult to put dark colors over light colors with oil paints. They'll mix and they'll become chalky. It's not such of a problem with acrylics because they dry fast and I can paint over them. But with oils, it does take a long time for these to dry. It's much easier to put white in these colors. Having the dark colors in place, I can make these lighter much easier than I can make them darker if they were to start out as light colors. I'll take the same color and put some cerulean blue in here. It's still going to be very, very dark. And I'll put the top of this lighthouse in. This is a brand new brush. It's got a nice chisel point on it. Now, since this was taken with a long lens, everything tends to flatten out, so I'm not going to get much perspective with this long lens. And in the photograph, this looks almost straight across, but I'm putting a curve on there to describe that perspective and the roundness of the light. There's some big areas of dark in this painting, but the rest of it's quite light. But I think the next step I'll do is I'll take and paint the side of the lighthouse. So I'll take my cerulean blue and I will add some white to that. And the reason it's blue is because it's getting all the reflection from the sky. But down here, it's going to get some of the reflection from these dark green trees. So down in here, I might add some green, but I won't have to do that right now. I've drawn the lighthouse in with pencil, and I was very careful to have this lighthouse straight up and down. And I measured the center of this with this ruler, just to be sure. You can't imagine how many paintings I've done or started, and then I'm halfway through and looked at it and realized something was a bit crooked. Now this may look very blue right now, maybe too blue, I don't know, but part of that's due to this warm background on here. Once I get everything covered, then I can start to make more fine adjustments. So as I look at my reference photo, I have the lighthouse on this side, which is the lightest because it's pretty white, but it's going to be warm color. Then I have a middle tone value, which is the shadow side. And then in between those two, I have the sky. So I'm going to mix a color somewhere between what will be this lightest color and this color. I guess I could add a touch of the light side of the lighthouse right now. So I'm picking up white and this yellow. I'm not going to blend these right now, but I'll just put that in there just as a guide for me so I can mix a value somewhere halfway between this and this, which will be the sky. I think I'll use primarily cerulean blue with a hint of yellow in there. So I'll just fill this in here. I'm going to lose some of my pencil marks there. I usually use acrylics, and to do a sky like this in acrylics has to be done very fast. One nice advantage with the oils is really take my time because these aren't going to dry. With the acrylics out in the field, sky like this will actually dry within a matter of a minute or two. I do know one thing though, that this area of the sky here will be somewhat darker than this area down here, simply because when you look up towards the horizon or the zenith, it always gets darker. So it goes from darker and cooler down to lighter and warmer. Now, if there are clouds and that sort of thing going on, that could be a different story, but that's sort of a general rule. I'm not going to mix these colors yet in here. I'm going to leave some space there. So I don't want this color to start to mix into this color. I've got brush strokes kind of going everywhere at this point, and I'm going to smooth those out. Here I'll pick up some of the yellow. Yeah, that's warmer. This can be a very subtle difference between this warm and this cool, but that's what I'm going to do here is make this slightly warmer down here at the base. When paintings, especially oil paintings, are hanging on the wall and there are a lot of horizontal strokes, just the light, an interior light can start to do funny things to your painting. So generally on a sky like this, I'll try and end up by using vertical strokes. And that way the light isn't going to catch it quite as much as using a lot of vertical strokes. In other words, I won't see quite as much glare in the painting if I use these vertical strokes. Sort of a minor point. And I don't want to do a lot of vertical strokes like that. I want to get some variation in there, but generally I'll have these vertical strokes. There, I can flatten out this color now, so I'll have a nice flat looking value here on the sky. Another nice thing about using oils is I can keep these colors on the palette. They won't dry out on me, so if I want later to go back and say blend these two colors, I won't have to mix them all over again. I guess I'll continue with the Lighthouse. With the smaller brush, I'll pick up some white and some of the yellow. And of course, the reason this is warm color is because the sun is hitting it. This side is the sun isn't hitting it, and where it's getting all its light from is the sky. So we got sunlight warm, sky cool, and that's what makes these two variations here. Now when I talk about the vertical strokes, that doesn't mean every stroke has to be a vertical in a painting like this. Strokes down here in these smaller areas can go any which way, and it's really nice to have a good variation in a painting. I'll wipe my brush off. Now I'll pick up this cerulean blue again, and I'll drag that right down between those two. I'll continue to wipe my brush off as I do this, and then I'll blend these together and get that nice soft edge. To blend these two colors together with acrylics is more of a challenge. It can be done, of course. I do it all the time, but oils do make certain things much easier. Now over on this side, I think I'm going to get some reflected light. So this will probably be the darkest part of my blue color. I'm going to pick up this warm color here, and we'll put some reflected light right over on this side. Some things I know are there, even though I can't see them in a photograph, and this is sort of one of them. I can't really see that there's a reflected light over there, but I know it exists. So I use this combination of putting in things that I know are there and putting in things that I actually see. I won't worry about all the details yet, just trying to put in the basics right now. I think the warmest part of this painting is down here where these rocks are. So let's tackle them next. But before I do that, there are some cool passages down there where some shadows are. So I'll drop a few of these cool areas in here. It's kind of nice because it echoes this blue of the lighthouse. This isn't really a beach, it's a pretty rocky area. Now I'll pick up some lighter colors, and I'll take the alizarin crimson and yellow, get a warm color. I'll add a blue just to cut that down some. I don't want it to be pink. I don't know whether it's coral or what. Probably not coral, but limestone maybe. I don't know. Patch right in there. Before I start making a lot of small adjustments, I like to get the whole painting covered with something. So we'll work on this next down here at the water. Cerulean blue. I'm going to make this very dark with just cerulean blue and ultramarine blue. I'm not going to put any other color in it right now. I think I may put some other colors in there as I go along with this. Wow, it's bright, isn't it? It's kind of nice. Of course, here's an instance where I'm using primarily horizontal strokes. But I don't base my whole painting on doing just vertical strokes just because there might be some glare from some lights. It's just an observation I've made while viewing other paintings that those horizontal strokes often do pick up a glare of interior lights. I'll grab a bit of this dark color that I used for the trees. Right along the bank here, I'll put some of that dark color in. It's probably where the tide comes up and leaves some algae and so on. Sometimes these tubes, especially if they're a bit old, the cap sticks to them. One solution is to hold a match right under the cap here, heat it up some, and then you can usually twist it off with a pair of pliers. I just have to be careful I don't melt the cap. I'm putting out another color on my palette now, and that's Prussian blue or phthalo blue. They're about the same. That has a bit of a green cast to it. I don't like to use many of the convenience colors. In this case, it might be good if I had a turquoise color, but generally I stay away from those colors. They have a lot of white in them, and usually they just cause me more problems than anything. But you can see right here, this phthalo blue is quite a bit different in color than the ultramarine blue. This might help to give me this more Caribbean color look to the water. I don't think I need to make too much of a statement down here of the water, so I'm going to leave this quite simple. And this is so wet, I really wouldn't be able to add much detail in here even if I wanted to until it dries. Well, I'll put the top of that lighthouse in. I'll take this dark color I used, add some white to it, and it does appear to be warm. Actually, the top of the lighthouse is a very dull, faded red, but where we're viewing it from appears very dark. So that's the way I'm going to paint it. Just goes to show that things aren't always as they appear. I'll grab my ruler so I don't get my hands in the paint. And right in here, we've got a few bars where the windows are. And I'll put in some of the light coming through that window with some darker blue. And I'll put some red in that to warm this up. We get a sort of a purple color there. I'm going to paint the underside of this right here, and that will be somewhat warmer than these other areas because it will be picking up some of the warmth from the ground. And then I'll blend that. I have to be careful with oils that I don't blend too much, because if I blend too much, so I sort of lose my own identity in the painting, because every one of these brush strokes is sort of the artist's handwriting. It's the artist's signature, and I don't want to blend those all away. I guess since I have this dark color here, I can continue on down and put in these windows. Now, had I not left this space here, it might have been difficult to put in these dark windows because it's kind of hard to put dark colors over light colors with oil paints. It can be done, but it's a little more difficult. If you have to do that, it's to really lay it on thick. Well, now that I've got all the areas covered, I can start to work some subtle areas within the big masses, within the big shapes. I'll take the yellow and mix it with this little pot of blue here, make a lighter green, and I'll start to create some of these lighter areas in here. I can put the lights over the darks much easier than I can put the darks over these lights. These are Australian pine trees. I think they're a beautiful, beautiful tree. Very soft, thin needles. Nice to walk underneath them, except for the little tiny pine cones that happen to be sharp. Fan brush might be good to flip these colors up into the sky. So with this fan brush, I'm going to use the edge of it, just bring some of these colors up. That way I haven't mixed these two colors of the sky in this dark area yet, because I've kind of left that for last. Now I think I'll put some negative areas down in these trees. We'll do that in just a few minutes. These Australian pine trees are very soft looking. They're very warm in color too, actually, when compared to some other types of trees. I don't want to get too much crazy texture going on here, but I want enough to describe this. As I look at this reference photo too, I can see some cooler colors down in here, so I'm going to add some of those. And right on the edge here, I'll just flip that up right there and make it look like there's a bit of grass growing right on the edge. Gives it a nice soft look too. And just using the very edge of this fan brush, just touching this here and there. There's a line of fence posts that go along here, and I'll take my dark color of ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, touch of the yellow. That just makes a very neutral color, dark, dark, neutral color. And I'll load my brush up, and I'll put in a few of these fence posts. The reason I load my brush up is because I want this to lay on top of this light color without mixing. There, if it's heavy enough like that, it doesn't mix so much with the light color that's wet in the background. There, we got the fence posts. I see one over here that's got a cross member on it or something. Maybe to add some more variation, I'll put another one right beside this one. Now I'll go back into these trees and put some of this blue that I seem to be seeing in my reference photos. Very subtle. So I think what's happening is all this light from this water is getting reflected up into these trees. So I'll just take that cerulean blue and mix it in with these dark colors. And I'll put some of that right over here. I just don't want to center that all in one area. I want to kind of spread this out. I don't want to localize that particular reflection right there. It should probably bounce around into all these trees. Adding this blue in here also ties the painting together in some ways, because this area is very dark. I don't want like a dark black hole in there. And so we've got so many other blues everywhere else. To put some blues in here will really help to unify the painting. Well, with a few more touches down here on these rocks, this painting just does not have much detail, nor do I think it needs it to make a nice statement. So I'm not going to try and add a lot of things that just by inventing them or so on. So I think I'm going to keep this painting quite basic. But right down here, it needs some area with a little bit more to it. So right down here where these rocks are, this might be a good place to add some small touches. Some of that burnt sienna is showing through, which gives kind of a nice warm effect down in here. We're so far away from the subject because of the telephoto lens that I really don't see in the photo any small waves or anything crashing up against this shore. It is a harbor, so there's not much going on in the way of waves there, but I'm sure there's some waves. So I'll take some white here. I think it's a bit of a cool color. So I'll just add a wave or two right along the bottom here where the wave might be splashing up against that shoreline. There's also a lot of sparkle on the water. So I'm going to take my white. I think this time I'll mix it with some yellow to make a warm color. Not real warm, but just enough to differentiate between the cool and the warm. So I'll make this warm. And I'll put some sparkle in the water right down in here, just where the sun might be hitting the top of those waves. If I were closer to the lighthouse, I would probably see more of a reflection of the lighthouse itself right down here. Since we're so far away, it just doesn't show up, or it could just because the way the waves are breaking that it doesn't show a reflection. But I think I'm going to add a slight hint of reflection here and just soften that. Now this reflection starts down here, not up here. That's because this part of the land, that part will be reflected in here, and then the lighthouse beyond that. So I'll start that reflection down in this area. And on this side, I'll put in just a hint of a dark reflection to reflect this. Right up here among these trees, I'll add some negative areas where that sky is showing through. I have to use thick paint when I do this so it won't blend in with these dark colors. So I have to put it on there and just leave it. I can't really blend it. I want to vary my shapes on this as I go. I don't want them all the same little small round circles. One right here can define the edge of the lighthouse. And I'll touch in some more negative areas with the color up here that I use for the shadow side of the lighthouse. With this dark color again, we'll move up to the top of the lighthouse and I'll put in this railing. This railing curves around. It just doesn't go straight across. It makes this curve and goes around to the back side. A few posts here and there. I'll take a lighter color and I'll just indicate some of this railing going across the front of this lantern room. This will be real subtle. And there's some small corbels right here. These are difficult to see in the photograph, but there are a few of these corbels that come right down in there. These corbels help to hold up this platform. These roofs usually have an overhang right here, but this one does not. I'm going to lighten this side of the lantern room just slightly. And on the right side, I'll take some pure cerulean blue and we'll put a cool color right in there. That should give it a little more form. I'm going to pick up some green and we'll put a hint of green right down here at the base of this lighthouse, because the base of this lighthouse is going to be catching some reflected light from these trees, and it will also help to unify and tie these two elements together of the trees and the lighthouse. This is very subtle. I'm going to put out one more color, and that's cadmium yellow light, and I can make a nice bright green with this. So I'll pick up my phthalo blue and Indian yellow, so make a very vibrant green. And I'm going to put just a touch of this right across the top here, where some sunlight might be catching this ground. And I think we'll echo this bright green color right down in here. Well, a few more touches to this painting and I think I'll be finished. And while I'm doing that, I'll show you some other paintings of lighthouses I've done in the past.
For more information about painting and travel with Roger and Sarah Bansemer, visit paintingandtravel.com.